Good morning. Am I on? Yeah. Good morning. Welcome to edX 2.0 at GRCC. We hope we didn't surprise you too much with that explosion there, but we find that blowing up a hydrogen-filled balloon is a great way to get people's attention. Okay. We hope you had a great break, time to relax and regroup. I guess I was able to relax a little bit, but I was kind of nervous about doing this and also kind of grumpy about having to do it. But then something happened over break which kind of made it worthwhile, which was I was at a party and I was talking to someone I hadn't met before, and as we were talking, he asked me what I did for a living, and I said, oh, I teach chemistry at the community college. And he said, I hate chemistry. And this is not the first time anyone said that to me. That's a common response. And my usual instinct is to say something like, oh yeah, well, I hate what you've dedicated your life to also. But this time I was prepared, though, because Mary Beth and I had been working on this presentation we're going to show today, and sort of our core idea in this presentation is the fact that science is important in your life, and that we've been working hard to, in the physical sciences department, to show that science is important in your life. And so instead of coming back with some snappy, mean comeback to this guy, I had a better response because we've been working on this presentation, and we're going to now show you this presentation that shows all the efforts that the members of the Grand Rapids Community College Physical Sciences Department have been doing to show the general public and share with the general public their knowledge, their expertise in physical sciences.
So we've entitled our presentation, Community Connections from the Cradle to the Grave. And as Tom and I were sharing stories, that title came out of the fact that for the cradle portion, I had just delivered my fourth child, and I'm in the hospital and not looking very pretty, waiting for the doctor to come in. And the doctor comes in, and it's this young man that says, hi, I'm Dr. Van Zee. And I said, hi, Aaron. He had been a former student of mine, and it was, not usually the way you want to see your student, but it was nice to see him and nice to have a chance to go, wow, look at what you've done with yourself. So that was very exciting. But anyways, we have one of the things that a lot of our instructors are involved in is public service. We have instructors that go out and do tutoring at various places. They do demonstrations, and they do presentations at various institutions.
We also get involved with a lot of the organizations in town. Right after we had our learning day at the museum, I don't know if you remember that, we actually got involved in doing a science demonstration at the museum. You can see those are a lot of our students there in the pictures doing the hands-on activities with students. Also, we work with the local American Chemical Society section every year to do chemistry demonstrations with local colleges too, over at the Lake Small in Muskegon. Those are our students in red there, make them stand out. Okay.
We have a relationship, or we've had a long-standing relationship with Godwin Heights with their sixth grade students. So they've come into the college to do some lab experience at the college. And then because it's our 100th anniversary, we put together 100 kits for them to be able to take back to their school and do some experiments at their own school. We also, what started as the Science for Girls, which turned into the STEM science program for girls, we collaborate with Kettering University and some of the local industries, and then we have some of the Catholic high schools. So the high school girls come in to mentor some of the girls as well as some of the college students, and they take groups of middle school girls, and the middle school girls will get together. They will listen to some instructors tell them the impact of science out there in the community to get them excited about wanting to possibly pursue a career in science or engineering. And then they also have where they get together in groups and have some experiments that they do. Sometimes it's a contest, who can make the better experiment. And so that's very fun. And then they are also going to start a Science for Boys. That's coming up next.
One of the camps we're really proud of is a forensics camp that we put on. It's actually was it started because we got a grant from the National Science Foundation. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this is for high school students from the area. They come to campus and they solve a crime scene. It's an arson, and so they get to work with residue from the fire, and they try and analyze ink and gravel from shoes and things like that and figure out who committed the crime. One of the big highlights of that is we actually have the Sheriff's Department bring in their sniffer dog, if you want to call it that. It's Ritzy. She's the big star of the show. Everyone loves her. And I had experience with her. She picked me out of the lineup as the person who committed the crime because I put a little bit of the chemical on my shoe. And she could sniff all these, like 12 people, and they all had different chemicals on their shoe, and I had the one chemical that was actually part of the crime scene, and she picked me right out. So don't start a fire and try and get away with it in Ottawa County, because Ritzy will get you. Some of the other camps we've participated in, Bill Faber does some stuff with the Cook Library Center. We also have done some at Martin Luther King Academy and the City Middle School, and also I help out at the Calvin College Glow Camp they have during the summer.
We have instructors that coordinate field trips, and one field trip in the geology department is they coordinate with Grand Valley, and the students go down to Indiana and they do a fossil dig. So I've had instructors come back and show me some of the fun fossils that they found, so that's exciting. And then we have a relationship with the Venn Observatory, and the astronomy classes will go over to the Venn Observatory and do some work over there as well.
One of the things we're really proud of is our interactions with local universities and colleges and doing research with the ability to have our students do research on campus, and then they are able to apply for summer programs. We have 2 guaranteed summer positions at Hope College, where the students go work at Hope College and really get to do the same kind of research you would do at a large university. We also have an interaction with Grand Valley, where they hold a position for us, and then also sort of informally with the Van Andel Institute. What you're watching now is one of the reactions our students have made. They made this orange compound and they sent it over to Hope, and I don't know if you can see that it's actually getting darker there. So that's a piece of glass, and it's been coated with this compound that our students made, and if you run an electric current through there, you can make by changing the voltage, you can make the orange color get darker and lighter. Okay? And so I don't know if you've seen the new, I think it's 787s, and you have windows. This is similar to that, so I'll put in a plug for Gentex. Gentex makes the windows for the new airplanes, and you use an electric current to make your window get lighter or darker, so you don't pull the shade down anymore. And that kind of chemistry is similar to the kind of chemistry you saw there. You change the current, you'll make the chemical change colors. Okay? So we're really proud of this research interaction we have with these other schools, because our students get the experience, and a lot of them have gone off to graduate school, off to medical school, and we're proud of the ability they've had to do that and their skills.
We have also classes that will go off out into the community to certain companies. So some of the sophomore chemistry students will go to Perrigo, and my son was one of those that went to Perrigo, and he thought that was really great to see what you can do. It opens them up to, if you want to go into the chemical technology end, what jobs are out there for you, and also kind of shows them what's out there for chemistry. We also, with our PC 101 classes for years, we've gone to the wastewater treatment plant just to give them an idea to see what we teach in the classroom and how it's related to things outside and what's happening out in the community. We also have our physics instructors are bringing in somebody from Amway this year to try to instill in those students a little bit better understanding, or a more applicable understanding for simple harmonic motion and damped harmonic motion, because the Amway scientist is working with that to deal with skincare creams for anti-aging creams.
Another thing we're happy about with our connections with the community is the fact that we've been interacting with a lot of the local companies, and maybe in a case of it's not what you know, but whom you know, it's nice we have these connections with these companies. For instance, the Pfizer Corporation had a facility in Holland that shut down, and because of our connections with them, when they closed the plant, they wanted to get rid of their equipment in a nice way, and so they donated that equipment to various institutions in the area, and we got to be one of those institutions. So these instruments may not mean much to you, but they're important to us because usually community colleges do not have anywhere near the amount of equipment that we have, and most of that equipment we did get from these big companies. And so our students can learn to use these machines hands-on that they will then run into out in industry and in research. So we've gotten stuff from Pfizer. We've gotten some material from Hope College. That looks kind of old and yellow, and it is old and yellow, but it's worth $50,000. So it was really nice to get that. And then also, like with the wastewater treatment plant and the interactions with doing the tours, they tend to call us up when they buy new balances, and it's nice to get balances for free, too. Another way in which we get equipment is through hard work. Jennifer Batten and Bernard Liebert wrote a grant, about a $170,000 grant with the National Science Foundation, and they obtained that instrument. It's a lot nicer looking instrument than the one from Hope, but it's brand new. It's a GC mass spec. If you watch CSI on TV, they might talk about that. But that's become a big part of our curriculum. It's the driving force behind the crime scene investigation camp, and we're really proud that Jennifer and Bernard obtained that grant, wrote that grant, and obtained that piece of equipment for us.
And some things that most of us don't know, because even I didn't know this, Elaine Kampmueller wrote the environmental literacy plan for the No Child Left Inside Act, and when we were collaborating with this and sending things back and forth, when I saw this, I was going to call Tom and say, no, you have to have written that wrong. It's the No Child Left Behind Act. So who even knew there was a No Child Left Inside Act? Tom has also worked with writing questions for the MEEP and questions for the Michigan Merit Exam. And then Jennifer, Tom, and Bill have also worked with the National Science Foundation as reviewers.
Also, interesting things for the area. Joe Hesse has been working with people in his lake, where his house is on Big Brower Lake, helping them keep their water clean, keep the lake vibrant and alive. And he's doing that as role as his knowledge of science. Bill Faber serves on the board of directors of the Blandford Nature Center, and so even though Bill hasn't been teaching chemistry for a while, we'll still count him in on this one. Will Millar has been doing a lot of talks about astronomy, and this I'm going to give a plug for him for this semester. I forgot what day, Will? Someday in February, so we'll get those details. He's going to give a talk at the Chaffee Planetarium at the museum, and it has to do with the Cosmos series. They just recently ran it again on TV, and they're going to show it at the museum. And Will be there giving a talk. Okay.
So how does this all happen for all of us? For Tom and I, it's probably started with our family, with our children. Once people know that you're a science teacher, I've had people say, oh, would you be willing to do demonstrations? That's kind of how I got started. But then it also is just that willingness to get involved, that feeling that we know it can make a difference, that we can impact people out there, and to try to share that love and improve that outlook on science, because it doesn't always have the best reputation.
And so that's our talk, Community Connections from Cradle to Grave. Mary Beth told you about her cradle experience. The grave experience happened to me. I was actually an usher at a funeral. And so I was standing there before the funeral started, and I was helping people get things set up. And this woman walked in, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and it's like, we recognize each other, but didn't know where. And so she said, do I know you? And I said, well, I teach chemistry at the community college. And this time she said, oh, that's right, you were my teacher. It was about 10 years ago. She said, I'm so happy I had that chemistry class because I just decided a few years ago to become a mortician. And the stuff I learned in that chemistry class, I used to get my mortuary science degree. And so whether you're in the hospital with your baby or whether you're putting someone in the grave, science will affect you no matter where it is. Okay? And so, now Mary Beth here is lighting this splint here, and it looks like she wants to try blowing up another balloon. Should we let her blow up this balloon? Yeah? Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Good morning. It's great to see everyone here this morning. I'm here to talk about flipping the classroom in my anatomy and physiology classes. And flipping the classroom, as many of you probably already know, is really just turning the whole lecture paradigm on its head, turning it upside down. And so my main message is this to all the faculty out there: you can flip the classroom in small pieces rather than doing it all at once for your whole class. Same message, other side of the room. Faculty, you can flip the classroom in small pieces without doing it all at once. Because the bottom line is that a lot of people would like to try this, but they're intimidated to do it because of the fact that it really it takes an enormous amount of time. And so you don't need to attack it as doing the whole course at once. What you can do instead is that you can actually look at taking things in pieces. So really the solution to that is to take one little unit in your curriculum and focus on doing that. And that's basically what I did. And so what I found is that the flipped classroom is quite effective, and I found that students really like it, and that it actually can be very effective if you implement it properly. So let's just be sure that everybody understands the nature of the flipped classroom. The flip refers to, in its broadest sense, the lecture becoming homework and the homework becoming lecture. So to expand on that a little bit, here's how the lecture would actually change. The lecture flip is basically referring to how the lecture changes. So in a traditional course paradigm, you have the instructor at the front of the room and the content's driven that way. Now we've transformed that into a series of actual short videos, and the student actually looks at lecture material outside of the class with these short videos. So that is actually a big shift. So when you look at this shift, you want to think Khan Academy. So basically, they're looking at the lecture content outside of class in videos. In my case, I use Camtasia. And in using Camtasia, it worked out really well. And I posted them on Blackboard, and students could look at that. The homework flip, in a traditional class, how does the homework change? From a traditional class, we have the student often working outside of class on her homework assignment, often in isolation. Now, that transforms itself into a group activity inside of the lecture. So this really changes the role of the instructor from the sage on the stage to the guide by the side. And it really opens itself up to having a really nice dynamic interaction in the classroom where students can be working on homework activities, working on quizzes, they can do concept maps, they can do written exercises. So the bottom line is that they can actually do a lot of different activities that are really only limited by the instructor's imagination. So I know a lot of you are familiar with this. A lot of you may be already, working with the flipped classroom in your own classes. So now we kind of know where we're at with that. So let me take a little bit of time to just tell you about my project. So my project for the past 2 years, as part of my FPE, was actually going through, and for the last 2 years, I wanted to focus on one little unit that I wanted to work on for my anatomy and physiology classes. So for some background, actually, anatomy physiology courses are a difficult course that challenges students and has a pretty high attrition rate nationwide. So one of the things that determines student success is how well they're actually prepared with a good biology background prior to them coming in. Knowing that, what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to target one unit, just like I mentioned earlier, one unit that I want to flip in my classroom. And that one unit was going to be the general chemistry and the cell biology. So that was my project that I targeted. I said, I'm going to just choose that unit to flip it. Why? That gives them a good foundation for success. If they get that core material down, it carries throughout the course, and that's their foundation for really understanding things well. So what I did was, for that particular unit, I made a series of about 19 Camtasia videos. Some of them were as short as about 10 minutes. On the long side, they were probably about 40 minutes. Average length was somewhere in the 20-ish minute range. So that was basically the nature of my project. So one thing I wanted to do was I didn't want students just passively looking at videos. I wanted to incorporate active learning techniques with it. So what I did is to give you an idea, I chose a little screenshot from one of my Camtasia videos. So this module will be under the cell biology category. What you're looking at is an illustration of the plasma membrane of a cell, the envelope that surrounds your cells. Students need to know the structure and function of this. So the way I designed it was students would have a hard copy in front of them of this same illustration that you're seeing on the screen right now. And this particular video is about 10 minutes in length, if I recall. And so this one would be, students would have the hard copy in front of them. They would be hearing my narration of this video. And then what they would be doing is they would have a set of colored pencils or markers with them. And what they would be doing is color coding things as I do it on the screen. So let's say 5 to 6 minutes in the video, what you're going to do is see something like this. So now we're looking later in the video, as you can see on your screen right now. Notice that students are intentionally being forced to write out the terminology for things like phospholipid bilayer and things like that. Because the educational research shows that if you have them be more active in writing things out and doing those things, it actually really cements these things home a lot better for them. Also notice that things aren't color-coded randomly, but they're coded for a reason. So similar structures have similar color codes. So what was the results of doing this? So I've done it for a little while now. The results were overwhelmingly positive. From the feedback that I got from students, roughly 90% of them said that they really enjoyed this type of flipped classroom, the way it was implemented. And so that kind of encouraged me to expand it a little bit more. So then what I did was I did the last unit in my semester prior to their final exam. So that gives you an idea of what I did. So now let me just kind of go through and talk about what are the benefits of this approach. And I'm just going to break it up in some major categories. So the main benefits of this approach that I found, the number one thing is transformation of the classroom into a much more dynamic and interactive environment. So that really improves the student-to-teacher relationship and the student-to-student relationship at the same time. So what I would see is as I float around the room, if they're working on a group project and I'm helping them with their homework or whatever activity it might be, students reported later that they really felt that they were, that the instructor cared about their learning, which was good feedback to hear. So the whole classroom environment became much more carefree. Students asked more questions. And so I really liked that change. That was a big benefit of doing this that I saw immediately. The next big thing that was a nice benefit for students was the reinforcement of a lot of the key concepts. So I'm not infinitely patient to describe the same concept over and over again. Thank goodness the videos are. So they could go into Blackboard, and especially for the weaker students could benefit from this because they could go back and look at it as many times as they needed to cement things home. What was the last big benefit? The last big benefit was having the convenience and flexibility to be able to do lots of different things. From an instructor point of view, if you have a sick day or a snow day, no problem, because students are able to go ahead and look in Blackboard and work on their assignments independently. The benefit for the student also was the convenience of being able to look at the videos any time of the night or day. So it didn't matter with their crazy work schedules when they could look at those videos. So in short, there were a lot of different benefits that came from this. But no teaching modality is perfect. So what were some of the challenges that I faced? The biggest number one challenge was getting to convince them to buy into this new paradigm. So this requires that students do work before they come to class. That means changing human behavior, which all of us know is really difficult. So the thing that I found was really helpful with this was having that hard copy. I could actually go and tell students, could you just flip open your notebooks, and I could walk around and immediately see who had looked at the video and who didn't, because the ones who didn't have anything marked up obviously hadn't looked at them yet. So that basically was good evidence for me as to whether or not they had done their work before they came to class. The other key challenge was creating the videos. Let's face it, it's time consuming. It takes a lot of time and planning to get videos and get them right. And not just the recording of them, but also, the planning and the implementing and even writing a script in some cases. So that was a big challenge. So basically, those were some key challenges. And the other thing that I really confronted was looking at the idea of them having to, you have to really prepare for what you're going to do in class. So another key challenge was, you're not lecturing anymore. So you have to basically focus on, what am I going to do that day? And if it's not a meaningful activity, students weren't always going to buy into it, so that could become a problem. And attendance could suffer because of that. So those are some of the key challenges that I found. But overall, I was really pleased with this little classroom experiment, and I think it really worked very well for most students. So in conclusion, what I'd really like to do is just encourage people who are thinking about implementing this in their own classes to go ahead and do so. And I would be more than happy to talk with anyone about more details about what happened in my experience. All you have to do is give me a call, pop me an email, and I would be very, very happy to talk to you further. Thanks very much for your attention.
Good morning, everyone. I want you to think back to last August. It was sunny, it was beautiful. August 10th, 2014 to be exact. My husband was in Grand Rapids, and I was up north. It was book club weekend. Many of us here in this room know what that means. And it was the end of a really good time on a Sunday afternoon. Group of good friends gathered up in a cottage off of M22, getting ready to end our weekend, saying our goodbyes, loading up the car. As a practitioner of mindfulness, most of you know what that means. I'm sure I can't imagine anybody in this room not have at least heard the word mindfulness. It's really about attending to the moment as it is, staying in the present. The future is ahead of us, the past is behind us, here in the moment, without judgment. And as a practitioner of mindfulness, I'm standing on the dock and my cell phone goes off in my hand, and I'm thinking, oh, this could be a big intrusion on an otherwise special moment, gathering with my close friends, saying goodbye. It's a 616 area code, and I thought, something tells me I better pick this one up, and I'm so glad that I did, because it was my neighbor, Charlie, back in Grand Rapids, and he said on the phone, he said, "Stacy, I'm here with Bill, and something is wrong. Something is wrong. He's not breathing like he should be. He's not in any pain. He's sweating profusely. The EMTs are on their way. And I can hear the sirens, and I can hear the dog barking through the phone." Now, what do you do in a moment such as this? You don't have a whole lot of choices. You got to move. You've got to keep your feet going forward. Found a designated driver, the one who enjoyed driving the fastest of the group, Mary Jo, who is now my close friend after this experience. I said, let's go. Get the charger, the cell phone, all of those necessities, the rest of it that wasn't ready, leave it behind. Let's move. Because we have 2.5 hours to get down the highway, down the Maple City Highway, down the Thompsonville Highway, to the US 131 in the long ride home. The choice I had was to pull back on some strategies that I had already learned. You see, this didn't come to me in a moment. I'd had some practice here. Sitting in a car strapped in with a seatbelt, going as fast as you possibly can on a Sunday afternoon, headed south, is a great place to practice mindfulness. The first step is acceptance. I had to accept the fact that I was caught in this parade of Winnebagos and nomads and bass boats, and you know, you've been in that parade before, if you've lived here in Michigan for any period of time. Moving forward, moving slowly, wheels, families of bicycles just turning. You've seen that phenomena where they're turning in front of you on the road to nowhere. Caught by that yellow do not pass line on the left. Stay safe, stay in the moment, because what was going on was an act of acceptance, which is one of the basic tenets of mindfulness practices. Acceptance. I didn't have to like my experience, but I knew somewhere deep inside of me that the outcome was caught possibly a future outcome, and all the past behind us after 35 years of a marriage. I didn't have to like it that I couldn't be with him in this moment, and all the hope and all the wishing that I could possibly do wasn't going to bring me there. I believe in science. I haven't seen anyone levitate. I haven't seen any cars levitate, and I don't know of a flying car. I was caught right there in the moment and had to accept. Now, Carl Rogers, person-centered psychologist, tells us that acceptance is the first step toward change. And what I needed to do now in this moment was I had some choices. How was I going to live in that car for the next 2.5 hours and stay safe? I had to contact family on the phone. I had to tell the news to my son, who had just finished his first rotation as a new resident in cardiology, who was about to learn and knew more about his father than any young man would want to know at that point in time. And I had to call my daughter, who was in DC, who was already feeling very far away. I had to talk to my mother, who was 89 and independent, and her son-in-law is the apple of her eye. She depends on him greatly, and this news was going to be difficult. So how to stay present in the moment, accepting the facts that nothing was going to change, and live there. Now you see, I'd had some practice, and practice is a key word here. Practice, and I had strategies, and that's really what this presentation is all about. I'm using the story of this heart attack as a vehicle, so to speak, to tell the story of what it means to have practice and strategies behind you at a time of crisis. As long as all the rest of this full catastrophe life that we live, happiness is overrated in my book. You've got to be prepared for these moments, and you have to know how to stay with them and remain resilient. You see, 7 years ago to this very month, I think it was next week, Bill was actually facing his first healthcare crisis. On a routine colonoscopy, 50 years old, they found stage 3A cancer of the colon. Now, let me tell you this, because part of this is also a little public service announcement, because all of those routine screenings, please follow them. Please go get it, because this one saved his life. And during that time, it's needless to say, it's a difficult diagnosis, as statistics will tell us a number of you have faced in this room. It was a bit of a train wreck for me, 12 long sessions over 8 months of chemotherapy. And let's just say it was taking me away, the stress was taking me away from being my best, most present self, my work, my family, my relationships. Something of a train wreck in the following year when I realized I needed some help, you know? And it was recommended that I try a course. It's called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. It's based on the work of John Kabat-Zinn, who was a biologist in 1979 and had already been practicing meditation and recognized how it was helping him through his own chronic illness, I believe, or chronic pain. And he decided, if I can get these kinds of results, maybe I can bring this to the University Medical Center and we can teach others through the steps of mindfulness. It's a course that's taught in a group setting by highly skilled practitioners. They've been through the training, they know it well. And it was here in Grand Rapids, and I learned these strategies that I then practiced every day. It was 3 hours a week, daily homework, not unlike taking a class as a student here at GRCC. Developing a sitting practice, learning to experience stress as it appears in the body. I really felt it yesterday in rehearsal. I'll tell you, this is a very bizarre environment under the lights. The clock is ticking backwards. It's very strange. And how to stay with that and not step into our fears. Today's better because we rehearsed, we practiced, right? You knew the gig. So these were strategies that I used in that car, in that vehicle. Now, I'm a counselor in a very busy counseling center. We see, I don't know, countless students. If Lene was here, she could call out the numbers. I'm not a numbers person, but I can tell you what life is like when students are continuously coming in for our help and our assistance. And what I've learned as a practitioner is that mindfulness helps me to stay grounded and in the moment. And some of the basic tenets of mindfulness are acceptance, letting go, and developing what's called a beginner's mind. So when those students come in, I might be asking them, tell me, what brings you here today? And it may have been my 15th, 20th question, depending upon the time of the semester. But to that student, it's the first time they've heard it. And so for me, the beginner's mind helps me to stay with them in the moment and listen with an attendant ear. I also know that mindfulness-based practices are, as I mentioned, they can be taught. You have to meet the students where they're at and what they're ready and receptive for and establish some safety there first, but these are strategies that can be taught because it's our thoughts that get us into trouble. You know, my heart was racing, not so much today, a little more centered because of the practice, but my heart was racing. You know, that primitive part of that of my brain was responding to stress in a way that would take me away in our thoughts. It's our thoughts that get us into trouble. There's no grizzly bear in this room, right? It's just my colleagues. There's no real danger in the moment. And when I talk about acceptance, I want you to know this is not about resignation. This is not about being complacent. This is not about losing your passion. This is not about zoning out. It's about seeing things as they really are in the moment. And from that position, you can make choices about how to respond. And another tenet is you simply begin again and again and again and again. So mindfulness, I think, is here to stay in its various forms. I'm not saying you have to go through MBSR, but you can practice it in a way that works for you. And our students can learn some of these strategies because think about what they might accomplish if they weren't so fearful, if their thoughts didn't get the best of them, take them away from being their very best selves. There's a curious thing that is happening right now. Students are coming in and they're saying, I'm not a math person, I'm not a science person, I'm not an English person, I'm not a public speaking person. And it's really interesting. I keep hearing that as if this was something that they would expect has been imbued by the right of their birth, like some kind of a fate that they can't learn. And I'm wondering if they could just be still and present to what it takes to study, to practice, to learn those strategies, whether it's how not to let your thoughts get the best of you, to taking notes in the classroom. All those skills that they learn outside that we teach in the counseling center to help them to be better students in the classroom. So they need to understand that, through hard work, they can do it. Well, this story has a happy ending. I'm happy to tell you that Bill Heisler is very much alive and present in the world. And another little PSA, let me tell you about how this unfolded. We were lucky to be where we were at in the moment. Even though I wasn't there, we were lucky because just 4 weeks earlier, we were out hiking in the Rocky Mountains. We were, the trailhead was high. We were above the tree line. He was cooking. I couldn't keep up with the man. No known history of heart disease, low blood pressure, low heart rate. As a matter of fact, he's not even taken the beta blockers because his heart rate was already so low. Some of us have a genetic propensity to develop plaque, and that's what happened. He had this one area of plaque in his right coronary artery. It was a 99% blockage. It was severe. And yet he remained conscious throughout the entire event. No pain. So please, this was not one of those Hollywood chest-gripping moments. Know the symptoms. And if in any doubt, if you're with a loved one, if you're with yourself, get help. Get the EMTs because they know the protocol. It's called MONA. Morphine, oxygen, nitrogen, aspirin. They had him diagnosed in the driveway before he left. And they told him, now get ready, Bill, because when you get to that heart center, there'll be a SWAT team on you. And sure enough, there was. And he's told this story over and over and over again about everything he could observe because Bill has a curious mind. And he was present, fortunately. So call the EMTs. They're amazing, the work that they do to get you to the hospital, to get what's called balloon time. If you can get to the hospital and you can get that stent in within an hour, the chances of survival are so great. And it was 39 minutes from the time Bill hit the emergency room bay to the time they placed that stent. Happy ending. If you come to my office, you'll see a lot of junk on my door. Some of it's so old and it's starting to get yellowed, and there's this little card, a little bit Stuart Smalley, I admit, but it works. And it's taped on my door and it says, peace. It's not about being in a place where there's no hard work, no trouble, no noise. It's to be in the midst of these things and still be calm in your heart. Now, John Kabat-Zinn tells us this quote, which has really resonated with me, and for any of you who have spent time watching the water of Lake Michigan, you can't control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. Thank you.
Howdy. How you doing? I'm supposed to take you into break, so we're going to have some fun with this, I hope. About 25 years ago, I had my first teaching job in Montana. It was a big deal to me. And our janitor owned about 100 head of cows. And they had cooked this up with the staff. I was trying very hard to come across as a Westerner. Hey, we're going to brand some of these calves this weekend. Can you come out? Oh, yeah, sure. Bought a cheap cowboy hat. Got there. Everyone was wearing baseball hat caps. Okay? Wore cowboy boots. Should have worn good cross-training shoes. Because what they had planned for me was going to make their day and caused me a hard one. Unbeknownst to me, what we were going to try to brand that day were yearlings, not young calves. They weighed between 300 and 400 pounds. I, of course, trying to prove my grit, decided that they look a little big, but I can handle this. And so I immediately went out and started trying to tip them over, but I always got the job of holding the rear end, which means you've got one leg hooking underneath the bottom leg, and the other leg you're holding. Any idea the strength of a yearling cow? First one I grabbed, had down, and he kicked me, hit me right in the middle of the chest, knocked me about 20 feet. Of course, these guys are laughing like crazy. Gillen, why do you have a problem with this? I don't. Lucky shot. Okay, lucky shot. This went on for an hour. I am bruised, I am battered, but I refuse to give in. Finally, one of the guys goes, "Isn't that a chute over there?" And the janitor looks at me and he says, "You know, I forgot we had one of those." This is a press chute where they can just run the cow in, right? Hold it in place and hit it with the brand. Okay. The humor of the day was at my expense, but we got them all branded. Plus, he threw a big wing ding at a steakhouse for us afterwards, and the beer flowed quite profusely, and the stories were told. So, what I'm trying to talk to you about is something that I firmly believe, and I think that we need to worry about the soul of our students along with getting their knowledge base where it belongs. And I think we work on the soul in different ways. How many of you have ever had a job that you did not like? Right? Okay, it wasn't fun to go in. You weren't allowed to have fun. You weren't allowed to laugh. And that was considered a bad thing to have happen. I'm a firm believer that laughter helps education. And I realize that I can't prove it right now, but I honestly believe that when people have a light heart, when they go into a classroom, and it's okay to laugh, I think that causes some amazing things to happen. While I was out west for Christmas, there's a family that owns a restaurant in Ennis, Montana. And the husband took a fall on some ice. I've been there. And he was going to be laid up for a couple of days. So this lady had baked me 2 rhubarb pies for my father. And my dad and rhubarb pie, it's just amazing to watch this. But she came up to me, and I was eating breakfast, and she said, "You cook, right?" I went, "Yeah, take a look. Yeah, I cook." And she goes, "Could you help us for a couple of days till he gets on his feet?" "Sure, glad to." And here's what I saw. They opened at 4:30, and there were people coming in by 5 that worked on ranches that had already put in a couple hours worth of work. Why did they show up? Oh, by the way, they wouldn't do anything but drink coffee most of the time. Or they'd ask who's in the kitchen before they ordered. Okay? But what happened in that restaurant was amazing. A bunch of lightheartedness from a lot of people that work 12, 14 hours a day trying to keep a ranch going. And then they went back to work. They needed that, I call it BS break, in their day to make the day go better later on. And I think that's one thing in our culture in this state, as it speeds up, as we're worried about information, a lot of things change. And I think we get too busy to work on the soul and we're too busy trying to get somewhere at a quick amount of time. So if you guys aren't aware of this person, this is Baxter Black. Anyone ever heard of Baxter Black? Sort of a cowboy philosopher. A Vegetarian's Guide to Cowboys. Many myths have been forced upon us that have fostered a misunderstanding of cowboys by herbivores. It is incumbent on me to shed some light on this subject for my vegetarian listeners. Myth 1, cowboys are mean to cows. This myth may be reinforced by the cowboys' habit of roping cows for sport, branding their young, and primping them like poodles at livestock shows. But in their defense, these practices are done without malice. This is just the usual predator-prey relationship, like parents with children enrolled in organized sports. Cowboys are right-wing political fanatics. Cowboys are suspicious of politicians, and like most Americans, don't vote either. They hold to a muddled code of the West that forbids associating with known feminists, but allows kissing your horse. This is very confusing. Cows hate cowboys. Cows have an IQ somewhere between a cedar post and a sandhill crane. It is unlikely that they lay awake nights plotting revenge. However, fate has made the cow and cowboy dependent on each other. It's the same unnatural relationship that exists between politicians and newspaper reporters, or lawyers and criminals. Cowboys are a vanishing breed. As long as 97% of the population eats meat, there will be cows. And as long as there are cows, there will be cowboys. However, they are hard to see from the freeway. Cowboys eat beef every day, or buffalo wings, pig's feet, cheek meat off an old sheep. They'll even eat hay if you put enough whiskey on it. Actually, they'll eat most anything the cook serves up, though I've never seen them eat a snail darter or a spotted owl. Cowboys are not like the romantic image portrayed in the Marlboro commercials and John Wayne movies. Of course they are. Especially if you catch them between getting bucked off before breakfast and losing their lunch on the way home from the dance. I love this guy. If you get a chance, he used to do an NPR reading of some of his stuff. Folks, I hope by laughing you gain some attention to what I was talking about. I use laughter as often as I can. If we're in a time of stress in a rehearsal, I'll do something that's got a funny punchline. If it's a tense time in a classroom, I'll try to lighten it. Everyone has a bad day. We all do. Being able to take a look at that and realize it, I think, says a lot about our teaching profession. And being able to keep things on a lighter tone. As my father would say, I don't hear any bullets flying. And I think many times we're so worried about the material we try to get in that we don't realize that the soul needs some work too. Thanks for your time. Oh, by the way, after break, a group of 4 musicians volunteered to play today. Realize it's before we even start the semester, but they're going to do a fine job for you. Have a great break, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning. As we get settled in, let's give these guys a hand again. Again, they're not in class, so nicely done. Good work. Yeah, pass the hat, right? There's the pennies on the table, but that comes in a little bit. So it is very good to be with you guys. As you come in and settle in, I want to make sure everybody gets a yellow sticky note in front of them. So everybody should have a sticky note. And because there's a sticky note, you probably should have a pen as well. But as we get settled in and get ready for the next little bit here, I want you to think about who inspired you. Come up with one name, and you're going to put that name on the list here. So who inspired you? It might be somebody from history, maybe somebody in your field, maybe a sports star, I don't know. Please write that name down for me. Who inspired you? I'll be quiet for a second here. Oh, I love talking to educators. You guys never be quiet. This is great. All right, so everybody should have at a minimum one name down about who inspired you. One of my inspirations was my grandfather, Harvey Gerald Hamster. He was part of the greatest generation, born and raised here in West Michigan, went off and served in Hawaii during World War II, came back, married my grandmother. You can see I get his really good hairstyle. Okay, you guys got to laugh or it's going to be a long 17 minutes here, okay? My grandfather worked 43 years as a tool and die man down at the General Motors plant on 36th Street. And my grandfather was an inspiration for me. When I was doing my undergrad, I used to hang out at my grandfather's house quite a lot. He was just a few blocks from campus, and so I used to go over there and hang out with him. And I learned my grandfather was a great practical joker. He was always making these little comments, and after a while, I learned that when my grandfather was making a joke, he'd kind of look at us like this, and he'd kind of give this half smile, and he'd say it, and he'd give a wink. And so it was always one of those things I never quite knew whether he was joking or not. So I tell you all of that about my grandfather to tell a little bit about the cigar box that I discovered one day when I was at his house. I was complaining because I was a few bucks short for something. I think it was a book or something. And he said, listen, go downstairs. I've got a little bit of money hidden away, and if you want a couple of bucks, go ahead and grab what you need. And so I remember going down into the basement of this old house that he was born and raised in, and way back in the back corner of this house, I see this dusty closet type thing, and in there he's got all of this stuff from General Motors that he's collected, and I find this old dusty cigar box in the middle of this corner, and I pull it out and open it up, and he doesn't have just a couple of bucks in here. He's got stacks of $20 bills, stacks of $50 bills, $100 bills. So I started counting it up. You know, there's $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and I'm still counting. The man had over $4,500 in a dusty cigar box in the back of his closet downstairs. So I took 20 bucks. What was I thinking, right? Okay? I took 20 bucks, went upstairs, and I said, Hobby, what the heck? What in the world do you have $4,500 in your basement? My grandfather took his paper, put it down, and he goes, well, you know, Chris, you don't know what I have hidden down there, and you never know when you got to get out of town in a hurry. So I tell you that story because I want you to take a leap with me for a second. I wonder how many of our students, when they come into the classroom, have these dark, dusty cigar boxes, and they're filled with stories. And I'd like to encourage you today to think about telling stories a little bit more in your classroom. And so my point is pretty simple. How can we use storytelling in the classroom a little bit better? We are filled with data points and information overload in this day and age. And at least in my mind, stories kind of cut through all of that noise and help us create some meaning. And one of the first ways that meaning is created is through that personal connection. I love the quote here. This is actually from the leadership literature. Shamir and Eliam have this idea. And they talk about that, in my mind, stories are a series of related events from the past. They're organized and interpreted in the present so that in the future, we have this genuine and authentic meaning that's connected. And so we live in this chaotic world. We all have these stories that surround us, and we need to somehow make some coherence out of them. And so, think about the stories and what brought you into the education environment. I don't know about you, but this is not where I expected to be. Not here at Meyer Gardens, but I never expected to be a doctor of communication. In my undergrad, I was trying to get out of the university as fast as I could. And so I remember graduating with my degree in radio and television. My goal was to be the next best sportscaster. It was going to be Chris Berman at SportsCenter and Chris Hamstra. It was going to be awesome, right? And so I was looking for gigs out of my undergrad, and the very first gig that I found was with this guy right here. Does anybody recognize who that is? Shout it out for me. Crash the River Rascal. There you go. Here I am, a newly minted bachelor's degree. The West Michigan Whitecaps were just starting up, and I got the wonderful job of being their clubhouse manager. That meant that I was vacuuming the clubhouse, doing the laundry, and making sure that kids younger than me were back in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. Great. Not quite what I expected. But I remember graduating. We walked in the afternoon, so I walked in graduation. We had a ball game that night, and so I was following Crash around so that he wouldn't get kicked and punched and all that good stuff. And we finally took a break, and Crash sat down next to me up in the clubhouse. He took his giant head off and put it next to him because, there are people inside the mascot costumes, right? Okay. And so Mark was his name, and he looked at me and he said, "So Hamstra, congratulations on graduation today." I said, "Yeah, I'm excited. This is great. What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I'd really like to get a job as a radio disc jockey." And he looks at me and he goes, "Well, you don't know what I do outside of here, but I'm actually the assistant program director at WGRD. We just lost a disc jockey, and we need you to start on Saturday morning. What do you think?" I said, "Are you kidding me?" I got my first gig in radio from a giant stuffed river otter on the banks of the Grand River. Is this complexity or chaos in the world or what, right? And so I worked there on overnights. I was talking, nothing dramatic. It was overnights. I was no good. My mother told me I had a face for radio. Okay, some of you didn't get that. My mother told me I had a face for radio and the hairstyle to boot. Okay, no more bald jokes. Got it. All right, but radio has actually helped get me, I think, in some ways, to becoming a halfway decent professor. I learned that there's a whole lot more to communication that's out there. How does that fit in human resources? How does that fit when we're working in governments and in organizations? What does that look like in leadership? And so as a returning student and with a growing family, continued to go on and work through that. I share these stories in my classrooms because, again, I'm trying to make some personal meaning about this chaotic life. You see a picture of my bride there, 17 years, Devin. She is actually going to graduate this April with her nursing degree. She's a returning student just like I was for quite a few years. I am so proud of her, right? She's like, "I'm going to be the oldest student graduating." And I said, "But you're still the best looking and smartest person out there." All right? So I'm really excited about her graduating. But I share those stories because, again, we have this personal meaning that we need to connect. So that's one of the first ways that stories help. The second way, and I can see some of you rolling your eyes already at me, some of you good hard science folks, right? "Hamstra, I'm in chemistry. I teach accounting. I'm in technology, man. It ain't about stories. It's about the hard sciences and how this works with this," right? And so stories help us provide those facts and help those facts come together. So here are some of the numbers from my morning, right? 96 and 43. That means nothing to you unless I give the context of 43 miles per hour is how fast I was driving on the highway, and 96 was the ounces of coffee I had this morning. I'm a little nervous. All right? That's a joke. I wasn't driving that fast. Good, you're still along with me, all right? So facts need to connect through storytelling. So think about this in your accounting class. I had a student this last semester. She's in the forensic accounting student. She's a forensic accounting freshman student. She did a wonderful job of taking a spreadsheet and showing us how those numbers were actually an embezzlement scheme so that somebody could set up a Ponzi scheme and they were taking money. And she made the point that white-collar crime is the biggest problem that we need to face in the growing economy that we have down the road here. Grace did a wonderful job of connecting the facts to a story. She did a great job. How about you folks in nursing, right? This is how the body works. This works with this, and this goes with this. Well, maybe you have a returning mother in your classroom who is able to give her experiences about working with her child who has a fever of 102, and this is what we did, and this is how the medicines interacted. And so those stories connect with some of those facts. And so stories provide some factual meaning. And then the third way to think about this is that stories provide the internal meaning. It gets down in our gut. I love in the classroom when I watch students who have got that great academic content and they're able to link that to the raw emotion of life, right? And so the fact is 2.6 million, that number. Those are the students that we have, or those are the people here in the United States, the individuals that have served in war overseas since 9/11. 2.6 million. We have those students coming back to the United States. And one of those students was Brad. Brad was all military, you could tell. He was Marine, big barrel chest, crew cut like myself, good-looking fella like myself. But he marched right in, shook my hand, said, "Sir, freshman speech class." He came in and over that semester explained to us what it was like to be a soldier and having to reintegrate back into the United States. His last speech had people crying in the classroom. And just as an aside note, I love it when my students cry in my class, all right? Because we're connecting that good content with the raw emotion. And so Brad talked about being on a 3-man patrol team, going over an IED, losing his 2 best friends, and having to come back to the United States with that. Excuse me. He shared that in his final speech with the great research about how many people are coming back wounded and how many people need help through counseling, through what they're trying to do. I saw people crying in that, and actually I went back to my notes just in preparation for this. All I've got down for his final speech is Brad, 8 minutes, 49 seconds. I don't have any notes because I was so involved. I now understand at least a little better what it's like for our students and our returning veteran students. So stories have 3 ways that they can do some meaning. They can provide personal meaning, some factual meaning, and some internal meaning. Now I see some of you folks too, you're like, "Chris, come on, I teach adults. Storytelling is for kids." And I would like to argue with that actually. Malcolm Knowles, John Dewey talk a little bit about our returning folks come into the classroom, and in the adult learning perspective, you need to have those life experiences as a resource. And storytelling is a wonderful way to tap into some of those resources to build the content and build the knowledge in our classrooms. But here's the key, and I heard it earlier just before break, right? We are so worried about stuffing in the information that we need to provide some time for reflection. And it does take time to develop. I see a lot of my students as freshmen, and it's neat to see them at graduation because I get to see some of those stories and see how those things have slowly grown and progressed over time. And so here's the practical tip. Storytelling is actually pretty simple. Very quick template here. When we talk about stories, we're talking about being intentional and strategic. It's not just the idle chit-chat that we have over the coffee pot, although that's important. The storytelling that we do in classroom needs to be intentional, and so you're always beginning with a goal. What's the point of me sharing this story? And so you need to think about that. But then you can also encourage that from your students, right? Encourage their stories so that we can somehow connect that and link that to the environment. I'd like to encourage you through your stories to be human. Go ahead and laugh at yourself a little bit. Go ahead and laugh with your students, right? Not at them, but laugh with your students. And then also make a point of what you learned. So we've got a minute here. Take a look at that person that you wrote down. What did you learn from them? I'm going to be quiet just for a few seconds. Maybe jot a note down. What did you learn from that person that you have? A couple of seconds. Another 10 seconds or so. Okay. And so maybe this is a start for you. Maybe you think about that person and you somehow include that in your way of explaining to your students in the learning environment about what brought you here. There are pennies on the table. That's okay, it's gas money until I get paid, no worries. But I'd like everybody to grab a penny there. Grab a penny. Practical step here for you to think about. Take a look at the year on the penny. A year on the penny. Maybe you think about doing this when classes begin next week. You guys are already off and running. That's great. All right. So you have a year on the penny. What happened to you in that year? What did you learn? Or maybe, if you've got one of those good content areas, you think about what happened in your content area for that year. I got a penny that says 1977. That's when the flux capacitor was invented or something. I don't know. Right? So maybe this is something that you could include. All right, last point here. Let me get everybody's attention. It's like my son's second grade class. If you can hear me, raise your hand, right? Okay. All right, that penny that you have is the investment so that you can start looking at the cigar box that you've got in that dusty bin in your back of your head, but also an investment to our students, right? And so I want you to start investing, and this penny is the start to that, to get into those cigar boxes, uncover those stories, and cultivate those stories. My final point is that we're all learners in the classroom. Everybody is learning. I have learned a tremendous amount from my students. And I do this we started this last Monday. I've already learned from my 17 and 18-year-old students that come into class. And so we are all learners, some of us just to get to stand up front a little bit. But I want you to, my encouragement today is to cultivate and encourage those stories from everybody around us. I'm looking forward to the interaction for the rest of the day. Thank you for the time. I'm going to go grab another cup of coffee, though. So, all right, thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about YouTube. And the cool thing about YouTube is that anytime somebody points a camera at you now, you have this wonderful opportunity to become the next great viral fail video. So I'm going to try not to do that. Who's this kid who's talking up here? A friend of mine in the photography department apparently told one of my students that that's that excited guy who's fired up about everything. Sometimes that's true. And so prior to coming into this year and a half of teaching I've been doing, I worked in TV, I worked in broadcasting. I was a director of technology type. Anything plugged into a wall, that was my problem. And so I've been dealing with this problem of closed captioning for a long time. The FCC came down on us hard a couple of years ago. They said, thou shalt caption any full-length video program that you're going to put on the internet, anything you put on YouTube. That's a big deal. That's a big lift. We were a little intimidated by this. What are you talking about? Every single thing? We're repurposing all this content. We want to be lazy and do it for free. You can't be bothered with that nonsense. But we're small market, West Michigan. We're top 50, but we're still teeny. So it worked for us when we were trying to do this captioning thing. We get out of it a little easy. We can use this newsroom captioning system. We take the newsroom computer, there's a producer somewhere, they type in a script. There's a guy doing a report, he types in a script. Those scripts become captions. Problem solved. But not quite all the problems, because it takes away what's great about any communication, and what's great about TV news, if you're the kind of person who's into TV news. That banter, that live moment that we're all looking for, that connection that you see on TV, that's the connection that we as educators are looking for with our students, that moment when they're like, yeah, I hear you. You want to do a live interview? How do you caption that? You have to pay a human being. Some person has to do that. Nobody cares about the weather in West Michigan. Nobody cares about breaking news, first best live, most excellent, team coverage. And then you also get into this problem of copy and paste. News people sometimes aren't really excited about all the writing they have to do. And occasionally somebody's going to grab a little copy paste from the Facebook, throw that on into the script. And the next thing you know, one of those 7 words that we're not supposed to be doing shows up on the bottom captioning of something. And as a guy in my role there, it's like, you wind up having a conversation like this with the staff about those FCC rules and how much they will fine us if they see one of those. So fast forward a little bit, and I start this adjuncting gig, and I'm sitting in my basement. And the program I am responsible for is primarily delivered online, which I'm cool with. I did my postgrad work online. So it's an environment that I feel, if you're the right fit, works really well, can really be beneficial. Those introverted learners we talk about, it's ideal. Those people who sit in the back of the class who never say anything, you can force them to say things with Blackboard discussions. Mwah! So I'm sitting at Casa de Rosama, and my desk's here, and my daughter's computer's here, and my son's computer's here. I can watch what they're doing. I'm on them. And they watch terrible videos. It's horrible. They watch these things called Let's Plays. They watch other children playing with dolls on TV. My daughter will play with her dollies and go looking for inspiration, and then start watching other girls play with dollies and say, oh, that's what I should do there, and go back. My son does the same thing. So there are these people out there who are YouTube famous for playing with dolls. And as a person who's devoted his life to making video that looks good, it was a little upsetting to find out that this guy, a Swedish dude who plays video games and just basically screams at his microphone way too loud the whole time, is like the king of the internet. Literally, he was dubbed the king of the internet. Some 19 million views on the video that's up there, some 33 million subscribers. My YouTube channel for my lectures is a little bit less popular than that. But so as I'm thinking of how am I going to deliver my course content online, I know that one of the ways people who want to see it is there are people who want that connection, right? People like that guy because they see his face. They feel like they know him, right? And I've gotten feedback on the way that I've developed this sort of let's play as, instead of let's play some silly video game, as let's play Microsoft Windows 7 Server, or let's play the Linux Plus certification guide. So you get this opportunity to make that connection that these kids are already familiar with, and some of these adults, as a format for delivering education. So as I'm doing that, have you guys heard of this AGC thing? You're not all from GRCC, so for us, that's our Academic Guidance Council. And they came down with this. All audio video media as part of classroom education will be blah, 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 blah. Activities should, I hang my hat on should, include either closed captioning, open captions, blah, 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 blah. I dig the accessibility thing. I get the accessibility thing. I want the accessibility thing. But I also understand, coming from broadcasting, that this thing's not cheap. What are the odds that anybody in a crowd of educators is going to have listened to NPR? But if you have, WGBH Boston, the media access group, these guys kind of paved the way for how closed captioning is going to work. And so I'm like, what does it cost to get a minute of captioning done? $70 minimum order. Caption rates are $7 per minute. I've been told by people in this room that I lack the math skills to properly execute physics, but I own a calculator. And if I do the maths here, looking at you, Professor Wang, if I do the maths here, $7 a minute times 90 minutes. Now, hopefully I break that up into chunks, right? 90 minutes is a long time to watch a video. $630 a lecture, 12 weeks a lecture, $7,500-ish. How many classes do we do a year? A lot, right? Hugely expensive. That makes this guy GRCC's most valuable employee. Woo! Give it up. All right, now, this is going to be a little meta, too. So imagine you are Simon, right? And in a couple of days, you are watching this. And here's everybody talking about Simon. So could we just have a thank you for Simon? A 1, 2, 3, thank you. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Simon. But he's awesome. He's GRCC's resource for how closed captioning gets done. And so I told him I was going to be doing this. I said, you got any words of wisdom for us? He said, yeah. And I told you I came from TV, and TV people are lazy, right? So I kind of copy and pasted his email here. But this will be available for you, I'm sure, at some point after he captions it. And here were his words of wisdom. Shorter stuff gets captioned faster. I'll run through it real quick. But if you need to get rights to have him caption something, you have to do that. You have to go out and get rights, or legal has to go out and get rights or something. For sure, Simon's not going to do it. If you're going to recycle material, like if you teach a subject that hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot, I'm looking at you, math department, then those, when I wrote down my hero, it was Saul Kahn, right? He's A, the inspiration for this kind of thing, and B, if you've ever seen that knowledge map he does, it's how I got my oldest kid through geometry, or how I'm trying to get my oldest kid through. And he also has a great point about consider doing this process even if you don't have a student with a need. There's a lot of side benefits that go along with captioning, and you cut down on sort of his last-minute stress of, I've got to get this thing done before they launch the class. And then there's his contact information. He's a kid doc at GRCC. The caption request form is grcc.edu/caption. That's my plug. Thanks, Simon. Someday, all of us, odds are going to get the letter. The letter. And the letter says, in essence, step up because you have a student who needs this service. So, as we say on the streets, stuff just became real. Because now I've got this sacred obligation, this pact between teacher and student to deliver dial-up connections in Windows 7 or something like that to this student who is going to need help. And now I'm under the gun to make sure that gets done. I tell you what doesn't work. Dragon Naturally Speaking, automatic captioning, that voice recognition stuff. Ain't nobody in this life ever said the words, just hello again, but Nike department. Nobody said that. I never said, the beehive there over 2 people were infected. Actually, I might have said that at some point. But I tell you what did work. My man Simon and YouTube. I tried Camtasia Relay, just kind of nerdy tech note. I sent him the link to Relay. He sent me back a YouTube link. I'm like, why are we playing this silly game? I can do YouTube. So we did. Consistency in naming just makes your life easier if everything kind of lines up as you go along. Good audio is a big deal. It's important. And then it's nice to embed these things into your Blackboard courses. For particularly like me, if I'm delivering a course that's built to be online, it's always going to be online. Getting that little thumbnail in there, you've seen it on news articles and stuff, browsing around the web. It's the nice way to do it. Transcripts have a world of benefits. And then if you have students with sleeping problems, if you have students who really can't kind of get to bed at night, you can set it up so that they can download the audio portion of your lecture, and then, come bedtime, pop in an earbud, and listen to the first 3-4 minutes of your lecture before they drift off to dreamland. So like I said, audio is important. Good mic. I've got, I spent $100 of my, they used to have a name for it, the money the school gives you so that you can have equipment, on a Blue Yeti microphone. If you look it up on the internet, they're nice. They're USB, they plug right in, and it's like you're a real broadcaster now. And then my office is kind of, well, it's the laundry room, but so it's not acoustically sound, and so you gotta pay attention to that. So when you're thinking about doing this kind of thing, when you're thinking about embarking on what we talked about earlier about putting content online, if you're either going online or you're flipping the classroom, make sure that you pay attention to that. This place has great acoustics. Audio dampeners in the ceiling, nice pipe and drape, excellent letters. And then if you don't want to spend the money for the acoustic treatment, the good headset and all that jazz, get a good headset. They're, like the kids use for gaming. A lot of these YouTubers, that's how they do, so it will work out fine for them. I think Professor Wang also said I couldn't use notes. So did Jeremy, but my talks are never done. They kind of escape, So this is that embedding thing I was talking about, right? You pop your video into the into Blackboard. You just right-click on it where it says Get Embed Code, copy-paste again, lazy, or completely accurate every time, which humans are bad at. Paste it on into Blackboard, and voila. You can choose your thumbnail. It's excellent. Now your tech-savvy students, they will know how to get from here to YouTube if they need to. But it's nice to link out to it, to put a link in there that will take them to the YouTube page so they know what they're going. And then someday you will get these awesome transcripts, right? We've all seen if you've done a diversity presentation, you've heard the story about why the Chevy Nova did not sell in Latin America, right? Nova. Car doesn't go, right? I'm not buying that piece of. Or the accessibility talk that comes with this, the upside of sidewalks, that are wheelchair accessible. Now you can ride your bike without bumping over. The door that you push open with your butt now so you can get your stuff into the room. Those are those side benefits. And you get that with transcripts, right? And it's how I prefer to learn. I appreciate that this visual medium is for some people, but I just don't even happen to be one of them. If a professor would give me the option to watch a video or read a transcript, I'd read that transcript because I read faster than they talk. Sometimes I don't read faster than I talk. Sometimes I talk faster than I think. So it's cool. This YouTube thing, this closed captioning thing, once you get into it, relax. It's going to be a ride, but just enjoy the ride. Thank you.